I want to talk to you about how to pitch your seed stage startup with Y Combinator. Y Combinator is one of the world's premier incubators. And the cool thing about Y Combinator is that they have experts in house to kind of help you along the way. But you got to really do your homework first for them to really realize that you are actually onto something very powerful. So, in today's conversation, I want to really talk to you about the common elements of a seed stage pitch with Y Combinator. You have what you do, the team, the traction, the unique insights, the market size, and the ask. How much funding that you actually need? Okay, so I want to first talk to you about what do you do. So that's actually your first slide. So if you are thinking about pitching your seed stage startup with Y Combinator, you got to really talk about what do you do. And what do you do actually is a pretty generic question in the sense that it really revolves around your unique value proposition. What are your products? What are your services? Okay, be as brief as possible. Don't Now is not the time for you to be as granular. No, you want to really. This has to be around your vision. So what do you do? What kind of a solution are you bringing to society? Maybe at your state, at the federal level, or even in your industry. So what do you do really has to revolve around the value proposition that you are actually bringing to the market. Okay. And when I think about pitching your seed stage startup with Y Combinator, there are some common errors you need to avoid when completing the what you do slide. Make sure your pitch is centered around customers, not investors. Investors are not going to buy your products or services. Investors are going to fund the business in the preliminary phase, but customers are going to sustain your business in the long run, right? So make sure your value proposition is actually centered around customers, your future customers. Make sure that you have accurate numbers, clear numbers, okay? Nothing really fuzzy, nothing really confusing. Make sure you have specific examples. So if you are trying to, let's say, have a seed stage startup, you want to pitch your seed stage startup with Y Combinator, you want to be as specific as possible. Don't really go with broad general examples. That's not going to help you. And make sure also that your examples are really specific in the sense that they have to illustrate the problem or solution you are bringing to the table. Okay, and that's going to the point. The bottom line is here: you want to be as specific as possible, so that investors know that you understand the problem and the solution you are bringing to market. Next, you want to talk about your team. So if you want to pitch your seed stage startup with Y Combinator, your team is really quite essential because Y Combinator experts and investors in general, of course, they want to know about your products, your services, about your company, but the team is going to be the focus point because the team makes the company. Okay, so here you want to really be as accurate as possible. Don't try to lie about your team's background. Don't try to lie about what they have accomplished before because this is going to this lies will come out during due diligence. You never want to do that. You never want to lie about competencies in your team. Okay, so when you think about your team's slide, this slide is actually is an opportunity. Think about it as an opportunity to talk about who is on your team, what they do, what their impressive accomplishments and credentials are, and if possible, how they have personally experienced the problem, right? Because if they're bringing a solution to market, maybe they have experienced the problem themselves. So this is a great opportunity to actually relate to investors. This is a great opportunity to humanize actually the whole business model. Okay. Now, when you think about your team slides, make sure you have titles. Don't just put names out there. That's just crazy. That this is actually one of the creepiest mistake you can actually have. Don't have that. When you have a slide like this about your team, put titles. Make sure that you actually understand that you can differentiate who does the management of the business and who actually writes the code. In other words, you have the technical staff, but you have the managerial staff also, the administrative staff. Okay, and don't actually waste time and waste investors' time, waste Y Combinator's experts' time by telling long stories. Nobody wants to hear your stories. Don't get me wrong though. Your stories might be very interesting, blah 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 blah. But you want to list facts. Don't tell stories, okay? List facts. Facts are going to bring you, are going to carry you further along the way than stories, okay? And also, you want to have specific accomplishments. So if your team has actually accomplished things in the past, you want to be as granular as possible, as long as those accomplishments are relevant to your products and or services. If you want to pitch your seed stage startup with Y Combinator, besides your products and services, and also your team, you want to mention your traction. So traction means what? Traction means that you want to really you want to convince potential investors that your product has already, let's say, met popularity. Even if this is a limited popularity, has actually met some interest in the market. Because otherwise, why would you actually spend millions of dollars onto a product that's going nowhere, right? So the traction slide, if you have it, should be a clear explanation of what you have accomplished since you started. So don't try to really put a lot of words. When it comes to pitching your seed stage startup with Y Combinator, you want to be as visual as possible. Use a graph only if it's impressive. Don't try to really confuse Y Combinator team or investors. Use graphs if they help you actually convey your message, let's say, more clearly. Okay. Now there are some common errors you need to avoid if you are building a traction slide. Make sure there is a time box. You gotta have a time box. Everything has to be actually contextualized. There has to be a timeline of your accomplishments, a timeline of the market buy-in, if you will, if you want to call it that way. So actually, don't really have a like if you have too much time, not much done. Don't really input don't input anything on your traction slide. In other words, if you've been working on the same project for 5 years and nothing has actually come out of it, don't actually have a traction slide at all. Because if you really have a traction slide and you really tell investors or Y Combinator experts that it's been 5 years, it's been 10 years, you've been working on the same problem and nothing has come out of it, that's really bad for you, okay? Also, it's one of those things where, and this is the last thing I want you to really understand, don't fake anything, don't lie, okay? Don't share work that's not furthering the company. Don't talk about traction when you have none. I mean, you don't have to necessarily have traction. Some industries take time to mature. Some business model take time to monetize. Don't try to really focus on what your competitors are doing. Focus on your own products and be as accurate and truthful as possible. Okay, that's really important. So if you are thinking about pitching your seed stage startup with Y Combinator, you also want to really bring to the table your unique insights. So the Y Combinator team wants to make sure that you have something that the rest of the public doesn't know or your competitors don't know. In other words, what is your unique selling proposition? What is your what they call your competitive edge, right? So your startup must have a competitive edge. Otherwise, it's not going to survive. Otherwise, investors are going to lose money. Okay, so it's one of those things where you want to be sure you don't write non-obvious, like you don't write obvious things. You want to write non-obvious things, not things that only you actually has some, let's say, some intel about. Okay, so for instance, when I speak about non-obvious things, this can relate to the problem, the customer, or the potential solution. In other words, what is your competitive edge? What is the differential edge that you have in the market? What is your startup actually bringing to the market? And how fast can your startup actually monetize the traction it has it has been able to gather thus far? Okay, so now there are some common errors that you need to avoid when it comes to this unique insights slide, because Y Combinator is going to pay attention a lot to your unique insight slide. If they realize that your insights are not as unique as you claim they are, that's bad for you. I mean, don't say that something is unique if you know a smart investor or a smart trader just realizes it's not unique. It has to be really unique. Okay, don't try to really let's say over overstate things. And you want to also have specific examples. See, the whole thing is that if you want to really convince your audience that you have unique insights, your examples must be as specific as possible. That way, your audience will know that you have some kind of quote unquote competitive edge, or let's say competitive intel. And you also want to use numbers or facts. So numbers are really going to really help you big time, because quantifying trends, quantifying stories, quantifying realities are going. This whole process is going to help you contextualize the investment opportunities for Y Combinator partners, if you will. Another slide Y Combinator wants you to really have if you are pitching your seed stage startup is to actually have a market size. I mean, this is important because when you reach out to Y Combinator, you got to have some traction. If you don't have traction, you got to have a pretty addressable market size. The market size has to be relevant enough for them to actually pay attention to you, right? It's one of those things where you want to understand that you are actually you are asking people to allocate resources to you, either through outside investors or through Y Combinator partners. Okay, so how big the market is what's important, because if somebody is going to invest in your startup, they do not want to invest in a small quote unquote small size market. It has to be relevant. Okay, it doesn't have to be big. Your market doesn't have to be big, because markets are very dynamic, right? They grow, they evolve, but at the beginning they must be relevant. They must be there has to be a level of significance for investors to actually allocate resources to your seed stage startup. Okay, now how you calculate the number is important. A bottoms up calculation multiplying the number of customers by the revenue by customer per year. Now, investors don't know how many potential users you might get, so you want to really educate them about it. But please don't fudge numbers. You want to do the research. You want to you want to really understand that you explain clearly the value you intend to create, right? So if you teach investors that in your pitch, they will think you are an expert, and investors want to fund experts. Okay, so common errors here: quoting some reports, some random reports. Okay, not showing the math or not talking about comparable products. So it's one of those things where you want to be as granular as possible, and you want to be as specific as possible. Let me give you an example. JP Morgan said that the online e-commerce market is $120 trillion. Who cares? You're not teaching investors anything by quoting a random report, because again, you got to really come up with something that is showing that you have competitive intel. Okay, that's important. If you want to pitch your seed stage startup with Y Combinator, you want to really talk about the ask. The ask is really important because you got to ask for money. Otherwise, why are you wasting people's time and resources and your own time too, right? So Y Combinator wants to make sure that your seed stage startup, the pitch deck that you have has the ask. Okay, now how much you are raising and what milestone will you accomplish with that raise? Is it something that you're comfortable talking about? You have to agree with your team that this is something you want to disclose to investors. Either way, investors wants to know exactly how you plan to allocate the money. Okay, so now it's important to understand that you want to like the percentage of startups that are funded is pretty low. A lot of investors say, you know what, I'll never fund this company. Okay. And it's one of those things where investors want to be very, 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 they want to filter things. Okay. They want to really be as specific as possible. So please ask for the money. And, but you have to talk about social proof. if you're asking for the money, you got to really show some kind of social proof, not just necessarily traction, but you got to really show something that shows that really explains or at least illustrates the fact that there is some momentum around your products. Okay. You also want to talk about the staff members that you're going to add to your team. Who will you hire, right? What kind of, because when you get the money, part of the money will go to HR, right? To hiring staff. You're not going to use the whole cash for product development. You want to use the cash for product development, for maybe mergers and acquisition. Who knows? Based on your industry. You can also use the cash for advertising, but also for hiring external help. Okay, so you want to really make sure that you are clear as to how you use the funds. Also, you have to talk about revenue and usage milestones. It's one of those things where investors want to make sure that their cash is going to actually support you on your journey towards monetization. If you're not yet profitable, but at least will help you scale real fast. That's what investors are interested in. So if you pitch your seed stage startup with Y Combinator, just make sure that you are actually asking for something with concrete numbers, but you're asking for funds from investors who have a long-term view, generally about companies. So if you are pitching your seed stage startup with Y Combinator, I want to really explain to you some common mistakes you need to really avoid and make sure that you can really that your startup can be around for a long time. Okay, one thing for sure, one thing that Y Combinator doesn't like is the fact that you are you're not really having impressive points. Like you are making you're making some points about your business model, but those points are too generic. They're not specific enough. Okay, they're not really convincing enough. They're not persuasive. Y Combinator is not going to appreciate that, and their investor partners are not going to appreciate that also. So be very clear. You want to really order points from most to least impressive. Always want to start with the most impressive, and then you go down from there. And also, you want to use a presentation to start a conversation. So it's all about storytelling. So if you want to pitch your seed stage startup with Y Combinator, you have to understand this can be a long process. This is not like investors are not going to fund you one time and then forget about it. No, if they really like your product, if they really like your services, if they really like your startup, if they really like the expertise you're bringing to the market, if they really like the vision that you have for your company, they're going to fund you over several rounds, right? So you want to use the pitch to start a conversation. And you have to pay attention to the investor. Of course, I said a little earlier that you have to focus on customers too. Customers are important in terms of traction, but investors are important when it comes to getting the preliminary funding process actually getting started, okay? And make sure that you limit the distracting slides to the minimum. Nobody wants you to have 20 or 30 slides if 10 out of those 20 slides are not really necessary. I mean, of course, maybe you want to really show that you are creative or your team is really creative, but who cares? Investors don't really care about all that. Investors are going to watch over several slides, and yours is just your pitch deck is only one pitch deck among tens of hundreds, okay, thousands, if you will, every single year. So investors' time is really important. So don't really put distracting, unnecessary slides in your pitch deck. Otherwise, you're going to lose credibility. You're going to lose. You're going to waste investors' time. You're going to waste Y Combinator experts' time, and they don't like that. Okay, so be very careful there. So you want to put slides that are only adding value to your message. So as a coda in today's conversation, I spoke to you about how to pitch your seed stage startup with Y Combinator. I gave you the common elements of a seed stage pitch with Y Combinator. So what you do, in other words, your products and or services, your team, the traction you have, unique insights, market size, and the ask. And I finally finished with telling you the common pitch mistakes that you might have if you go with Y Combinator. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.